There are lots of different ways to propagate plants. Some methods are relatively simple, and some plants it doesn't take much skill or knowledge to propagate them successfully. But for others, propagation may be a skillful and complex task. Okay, there are two ways you can propagate plants, two main ways, sexually and asexually. Now, sexual propagation is typically when you're growing a plant from a seed, and the seed is produced from a flower. Now, a flower has two sexual parts, a male part and a female part. The male part fertilizes the female part. And the male part may come from the same flower and same plant as the female part, or it may come from a different plant. If it comes from a different plant, then the seed that is produced may have some characteristics of the other plant that the male pollen part came from. The bottom line is, seed doesn't necessarily produce a plant which is exactly the same as the plant that it came off. You can have a red flowering plant being produced by seed that comes off a yellow flowering plant. If you grow asexually, in other words without seed, without any sexual process involved, then the new plant that you produce comes true to type. It only has one parent. Asexual or vegetative propagation involves taking parts of tissues such as stem, root or leaf and doing things to it to get it to grow into a new plant. Plants grown by asexual methods are genetically identical to their single parent. Asexual techniques are therefore used if you wish to ensure the plants you have grown have the same characteristics as the parent plant. The most common asexual technique is cuttings. This is when we take a piece of a plant and put it into a medium which will stimulate it to grow roots and shoots. Other forms of vegetative propagation include tissue culture, grafting, budding, separation, division, offsets and layering. Choosing whether to propagate your plants by sexual or asexual techniques will depend on a number of things, such as what plant you're propagating, what you want to use the propagated plant for, and the equipment and skills that you might have available. Let's compare these two propagation methods. Sexual propagation is generally cheaper because it's easier to collect and handle thousands of seeds than thousands of grafts and cuttings. Some plants are not easy to propagate by seed, but many are very easy, requiring a relatively low level of skill to achieve good results. Many asexual techniques are highly skilled. Some plants are easier to strike by cuttings, but others are more difficult to strike. With a little practice you may have some success in grafting, but to be skilled enough to graft commercially can take years of training and experience. Tissue culture is a very scientific technique, and you really need the skills of at least a good laboratory technician. Separation and division are perhaps the only asexual techniques that require very minimal skills. Remember, these comparisons are not solid rules though. There are exceptions. Choosing the most appropriate technique to use will depend on many things. Some plants are simply difficult or impossible to propagate by most methods, so you mightn't have too much of a choice. You simply have to use the technique that works. If we can exercise control over the fertilisation of a flower, then we may be able to produce seed with known characteristics. If the seed produced is from two parents which are very similar, or the seed producer is able to control where the pollen comes from and the flower on which it fertilises, then the characteristics of the resulting seed can usually be fairly well predetermined. A lot of vegetables, flowers and even herbs can be grown from seed produced in this way. If the source of seed is reliable, or if the variation of characteristics within the species is relatively predictable, then seed may be a very appropriate technique to use. You find with some plants you can get variation in flower colour. The eucalypt is a typical example where you can take seed from one eucalypt that has a red flower and you can end up with eucalypts growing that have red, white, orange, all different types of coloured flowers. When we grow annual flowers from seed, usually the flowers come true as we expect them to. Commercial propagation involves producing plants at a price. You need to propagate fast and keep costs such as labour, materials and equipment low on a per plant basis. The technique chosen by amateur gardeners may be chosen as a personal challenge, or perhaps because it guarantees success, even if it takes longer and costs more to carry out.